Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're putting on our critical listening ears. We're tracing the lineage of one of the most ambitious and uh, longest running lines in digital guitar processing.
We are talking about the Bias SGT series.
Exactly. And this isn't just a gear review. I mean, this is really an exploration of a technological arc that spans, over 2 decades?
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
And it's a story that really mirrors the entire history of amp modeling itself. We're talking about the journey from these early kind of constrained digital sounds to the fluid realism we have today.
Yeah, and the GT series, it's always been Bios's high-end laboratory, hasn't it?
It absolutely has.
Right.
And, the sources we've compiled for this really make one thing perfectly clear. While other companies might have focused on convenience, the mission of the GT line was always and still is about one thing: maximum capability.
Okay, let's unpack that word capability right away. Because when people think of Bios multi-effects, a lot of them probably think of the ME line, which is simpler, more user-friendly. But the GT series, it's on a whole different philosophical plane. What defines that flagship status?
It all comes down to the architecture and the sheer depth of the signal chain. You see, the ME line is built for speed, plug in, find a sound, and play.
Right, quick and easy.
Exactly. The GT line, on the other hand, is designed to either replace or integrate with an entire complex studio rack
Oh.
or a massive pedal board. It gives you the power to run, say, multiple amp and cabinet models at the same time, route signals in parallel.
Or in series, pretty much any way you can imagine.
Any way you want. And it provides all the complex inputs and outputs you need for professional mixing or stage monitoring. It's really about system building, not just finding a tone.
And as we track this long history, the sources highlight 2 massive technological phases that really divide the story of the GT series. These 2 phases are, they're the key to understanding how all of this evolved.
Precisely. First, you have the foundational era. This spans almost 20 years, and it was defined entirely by one technology: COSM.
Composite Object Sound Modeling.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And COSM was all about breaking down and digitally modeling the individual physical components of the sound: the tubes, the speakers, the cabinet materials. It was modeling what the amp was built from.
And then we hit the modern era, the big reset.
Yeah, around 2018.
Yeah.
And that's defined by Erhard.
Augmented impulse response dynamics.
Right. And this was a total paradigm shift. Bias has moved away from just modeling the components to modeling the feel, and crucially, the interaction of the entire amplifier ecosystem.
So it's modeling how the amp behaves, not just what's inside it.
Exactly. And that transition is what makes this deep dive so compelling. We're going to trace that whole progression, starting with the GT3, which, basically put a rack processor on the floor.
All the way up to the modular dynamic system we see in the latest GT1000 series.
It's quite a journey.
To really understand where we are now, I think you have to appreciate the huge leap that BIS took back in the late 90s. So let's jump back to 1998, the launch of the GT3. This machine, it was basically a declaration of war against the big, expensive, rack-mounted processors that dominated the pro scene back then.
It really was. The GT3 was the end of Bar SS just sort of dipping their toes into multi-effects. This was the beginning of their flagship era. Its significance is all in the architecture. It established that whole GT philosophy.
Deep editing, total control.
And an architecture borrowed heavily from that professional rack gear, just, crammed into a stage-ready floor unit. Before this, floor units were often just an add-on to a rig.
The GT3 wanted to be the whole rig.
It aimed to be a centerpiece, yeah.
And that centerpiece ran on the first generation of COSM amp modeling. In 1998, digital modeling it was the Wild West. So
Right.
Looking back, what did early generation COSM actually mean for the player?
For the user, it was a massive leap in versatility. It meant having digital versions of iconic amplifiers for the first time in a Bias floor unit. It had flexible routing, stereo I/O, MIDI for external control.
And all the essential effects blocks: overdrive, distortion, modulation, delay, reverb.
And, one constant through the entire GT line, even back then, was Boas's strength in time-based effects. The sources all confirm that even on that first GT3, the modulation and delay quality was already professional grade. A real strength.
But the amp modeling itself, it definitely had the limitations of 1998 tech. The sources often described the clean tones as solid, but you could hear that it was digital.
A little sterile, maybe.
And the distortion models were aggressive, but often described as grainy by modern standards. We should probably explain why that graininess existed.
Yeah, that's a key point. That graininess wasn't a flaw in the design, not really. It was a necessary technological compromise. It was all dictated by the DSP the digital signal processing power they had at the time.
So not enough horsepower?
Not nearly enough. I mean, think about it. To simulate the incredibly complex, nonlinear harmonic distortion of a real tube amp requires enormous computational power. The processors in the late 90s just couldn't handle that full complexity.
So they had to cut corners, so to speak.
They had to. Engineers often had to use things like deep compression and simplification of the harmonic structure just to fit the sound modeling into the available DSP budget.
So if you were trying to model, say, a cranked Marshall head, you got the basic frequency shape and the gain structure.
But you sacrificed all the subtle stuff. The dynamic response, the complex way harmonics decay, all the things that make a real tube amp feel alive.
Right. It was a trade-off then, immense versatility and control in one box.
But with that slight tonal compromise, that noticeable fizz or graininess, especially on the high gain sounds. The GT3 was the foundation for sure, but it showed the journey toward realism was really just beginning.
Speaking of that journey, let's jump ahead 3 years, 2001, the launch of the GT6. Now, this wasn't just a small update. The sources marked this as a huge technological leap, using something they called improved KSM.
And this is the unit that really propelled the GT line into being a genuine touring staple.
So what specific improvements did it have that addressed the GT3's limitations?
The main focus was on realism in the modeling. They saw a really dramatic improvement in the amp response, and that was purely down to more powerful DSP.
So less of that graininess.
A lot less. The distortion models were less compressed, less fizzy. But architecturally, the biggest leap was the introduction of more KOIS-M amp models, and crucially, dual signal chains with parallel routing.
Okay, that is a massive architectural jump for a floor unit. If you're a touring guitarist listening to this, why do dual signal chains completely change the game?
It brings studio-level complexity to the stage. In the GT3, you're pretty much running a single linear signal chain, one effect after another.
Right.
With the GT6's dual chains, you could, for example, run a distortion block in parallel with a completely clean signal and then mix them back together. Or, more commonly, you could split your signal after the amp model and run two completely different post-amp effects paths.
Like one path with a chorus and delay, and another with a volume swell, and then blend them.
Exactly. It just dramatically increased the sonic palette and the complexity you could create. It really solidified that capability identity we talked about.
And they also enhanced the speaker simulation here, which is, I mean, that's half the battle when you're trying to replicate a mic'd cabinet sound.
Yes. And that just shows the more holistic approach they were starting to take.
Yeah.
They realized that modeling the amp head perfectly wasn't enough if the speaker sim was still basic. The GT6 improved both.
And the result?
Well, the resulting tone was still sometimes described as somewhat compressed and processed. It was still an artifact of early 2000s digital modeling. But its reliability and flexibility.
Yeah.
I mean, it became indispensable on the road. It really earned its title as a touring standard.
So if the GT6 introduced dual chains, the GT8 in 2004 took that concept and just completely weaponized it. This unit, running on advanced KSM, is the one the sources always call the performance powerhouse.
That's the one.
What specific performance limitation was the GT8 designed to just crush?
It was designed to crush the inability to layer complex amp tones seamlessly. You see, the GT6 had dual signal paths, but the GT8 introduced the ability to run dual KOIS-M amps simultaneously.
Ah, okay. That's a much more demanding task computationally.
Oh, massively. Imagine being able to run a simulated Fender Twin right alongside a high-gain Mesa simulation, assign their levels to an expression pedal, and then blend between them in real time.
So the difference is the GT6 let you run effects in parallel, but the GT8 let you run two completely independent processor-intensive amp simulations at the same time.
Exactly. And that demanded a serious boost in the internal architecture. That includes improved AD and DA conversion.
And that's a technical point, but it's really critical for the listener, right? Better conversion means a cleaner signal.
It's vital. Better A to D conversion means the raw signal from your guitar is captured more accurately with less noise before any processing even starts. And better D to A conversion on the output means the final sound going to your speakers is cleaner, reducing that sort of digital haze or harshness you'd hear in older units.
And the result of all that was that the amp models became noticeably more dynamic. The crucial touch response improved.
Yes, guitarists started feeling a much more direct relationship between how hard they were picking and the tone they were getting. That's a real hallmark of a great tube amp.
So that improved feel combined with this massive expansion in control, a global EQ, assignable foot switches, deep control assigns for almost every parameter.
It made the GT8 just legendary for its roadworthiness. I mean, you couldn't walk into a major rock venue in the mid-2000s without seeing a few of these lined up backstage. It was the ultimate balance of fidelity, control, and just bulletproof reliability for any touring pro.
Okay, so after the GT8 pretty much perfected performance control, the question then became, how much further can we possibly push the complexity?
And the answer arrived in 2008, the GT10.
Which many people still refer to as the SciSM supercomputer. This thing ran on next-gen COSM plus advanced DSP. What was the priority here for BAW-SS?
With the GT10, it was all about maximizing the roading depth. They maintained the dual amp modeling from the GT8, but they just pushed the flexibility to the absolute extreme.
What was the goal?
The goal was to give the user the ability to design patches of, frankly, mind-boggling complexity. You could have maybe 6 effects blocks before the amp, and then another 4 blocks split and running in parallel after the amp, and have each one controlled by a different expression pedal function.
That sounds intense. It must have required a serious user interface overhaul to even manage that kind of power.
It absolutely did. The depth was enormous, which is why they introduced the first color LCD screen on a GT unit, just to make navigation a little more manageable. They implemented the deepest assign system they'd ever made.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. You could map the expression pedal sweep to simultaneously decrease the gain on amp A, while at the same time increasing the mix on a delay in path B. You could create these incredibly complex dynamic sound morphs with just one single foot movement.
That kind of intricacy was
Yes,
revolutionary at the time.
It really was.
But this maximum capability, it came with a trade-off, didn't it? A big one we hear reflected in all the community feedback from that time.
A very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
Yes. The GT10 was deep, powerful, and incredibly complex. That's why it's remembered as the last COSM supercomputer. While the tonal results could be absolutely outstanding, the effects quality was extremely high. It required real dedication. You had to set aside a weekend, just to really learn how to program it.
It became the benchmark for what could be done with COSM, but maybe not what the average user wanted to do right out of the box.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So after pushing COSM to its absolute limit of complexity, the next logical move had to be refinement. And that brings us to 2012 and the GT100. The sources call this the transition unit.
Running the final evolution of COSM.
Right. What was the thinking here?
The GT100 was a necessary pivot. Well, I think BASS realized that the intimidation factor of the GT10 was starting to limit its audience. So the GT100 focused relentlessly on 2 things: sound quality and usability.
So it still had the power.
Oh yeah, it retained the dual signal paths and the excellent effects, but the user interface was simplified. And the presets were significantly better right out of the box. You didn't need to be a coding genius to get a great sound almost instantly.
And tonally, this is where the COSM architecture really matured, isn't it? The GT100 is known for having smoother amp tones, better dynamics, and critically, a less harsh top end.
That suggests they were finally overcoming those early digital artifacts without having to completely abandon the COSM architecture they'd spent so long developing.
How'd they do it?
They just optimized the algorithms to squeeze out the maximum amount of dynamics. The sound was much less polished or processed sounding and a lot closer to that raw tube experience than any previous generation.
And the effects were top-notch.
The sources noted that the effects quality on the GT100 was virtually indistinguishable from pedals. This unit was really the final evolutionary stage of COSM. They had squeezed every last drop of performance and realism out of that fundamental technology. It set the stage for the radical change that they knew was necessary to move forward.
But before that radical change, BASS did something really smart. They took the opportunity to democratize this perfected COSM sound.
Yes, in 2017, we get the GT1.
Which wasn't a flagship unit, but it was hugely significant.
Absolutely. The GT1 took that simplified GT100 engine and shrunk it down into a compact, affordable, portable little box. Its philosophy was purely about access.
So for the listener who's, running a home studio or needs a powerful but lightweight backup rig for travel,
the GT1 was perfect. It put GT-level processing, the result of nearly 20 years of COSM refinement, into this tiny, lightweight chassis.
Now, it did sacrifice some things, the heavy-duty inputs and outputs, and some of the sheer headroom of the flagship GT100.
Of course.
But its value proposition for the modern audience, especially the bedroom player, was massive.
It really was. That Less headroom that you see mentioned in reviews, it simply means that it didn't have the same level of dedicated DSP to maximize the dynamic range needed for, massive stage volumes.
But for the home guitarist, for practice, for direct recording,
It was ideal. It delivered high-quality, controllable tones at low volumes, which is a common problem for players who can't crank a real amp. The GT1 really achieved that goal of making the mature COSM architecture widely accessible, right before Bias performed its complete architectural overhaul.
and with the GT1, we close the book on the COSM story. A long, successful march of continuous refinement, all based on modeling the components of the sound.
And now we enter a completely new era. We move from composite object sound modeling to augmented impulse response dynamics.
The aired revolution.
Exactly.
So the transition to the GT1000 in 2018, this represents a seismic shift in Boas philosophy. This was not an iteration of COSM. It was, as the sources clearly state, a total reset.
A total reset.
Why? Why did Boas S feel the need to just abandon 2 decades of successful COSM technology for something brand new?
Well, CSM, for all its success, was hitting a wall, and that wall was primarily in dynamic feel. It was great at modeling the sound of a circuit, but modern modelers, for the companies like Helix and Fractal, they were showing that players now demanded the feel.
The interaction.
Yes, the dynamic interaction between the player's fingers, the strings, the simulated tubes, the speakers, all of it. Era was engineered specifically to bridge that gap.
So we shift from modeling what an amp contains to modeling how the whole amp system interacts. Tell us more about AIR, Augmented Impulse Response Dynamics. What does that augmented part actually mean in practice?
Arity is all about simulating the nonlinear interconnected nature of a true tube amp. Think about a real amplifier. When you hit a power chord really hard, the power supply sags for a moment, the output transformer reacts to the speaker load, the entire system behaves dynamically.
And older CSM struggled to capture that in real time.
It really did. Arity uses high-resolution processing to simulate all of these phenomena holistically as a complete system.
So if your SM gave us a perfectly recorded, maybe slightly compressed picture of an amp, AIR is the live video feed, including the environment, the subtle noise, and that responsive flutter that happens between the notes.
That is a perfect way to put it. The goal was, and I'm quoting here, true amp-like interaction with power amps. This gives the GT1000 a feel under the pick that the earlier COSM units, just due to their DSP limitations, simply couldn't achieve.
You feel the amp responding to your picking attack. Your volume knob changes.
As up in a much more fluid analog manner, yes.
A huge part of any modern modeler is cabinet simulation. The GT1000 also introduced a major innovation here, incorporating IR-like cabinet behavior that was, crucially, dynamic rather than static. This seems like a direct challenge to the popular impulse response technology.
It is a profound technological jump. You see, impulse responses, or IRs, are excellent. They're highly accurate snapshots of a speaker cabinet at a specific moment in time, with a specific mic at a specific volume. But they are fundamentally static. They don't change.
Right.
But a real speaker cabinet is a dynamic electromechanical system. Its impedance changes with frequency, it vibrates, its response changes depending on how hard the power amp is pushing it.
So if you load a static IR, it sounds the same whether you're playing quietly or absolutely diming the simulated power amp.
Exactly. Arity's dynamic cabinet modeling ensures that the simulated cab interaction changes realistically based on the energy coming out of the simulated power amp. It moves, it breathes, it resonates like a real physical cabinet. It adds this crucial layer of authenticity that banishes that static quality of traditional cab simulation.
And beyond the core modeling engine, the GT1000's architecture was designed for the modern studio and stage, studio-grade effects, extensive routing. But they also added Bluetooth. That seems like a direct response to those complexity critiques of the old GT10.
Oh, it's a massive user experience improvement. The GT10 was so complex to edit on the unit itself. The GT1000 is still a very deep machine, but adding Bluetooth allows for easy, intuitive wireless editing through an app on your phone or tablet.
It makes that immense power much less intimidating, a key lesson learned from the COSM era.
For sure.
And the resulting tonal profile was a massive validation of this whole arid philosophy. The reviews consistently mention a significant reduction in that digital compression. The cleans and edge of breakup tones, which were often the weakest point of early digital modeling, suddenly became excellent.
And the high gain, was monitored and controlled. The signal didn't just choke when you pushed it hard. It sagged, it fluttered, it responded like a real tube circuit. It finally achieved that amp-like feel that players had been chasing for 20 years.
So the GT1000 successfully put BAW-SS right back into that top-tier modeler conversation, competing head-to-head with anyone on dynamic capability.
Absolutely.
And then just 2 years later, in 2020, BAW-SS did something that truly defined the future of the Arid platform. They released the GT1000 core, and this wasn't a stripped-down version. This was the entire flagship engine condensed into a compact, pedalboard-friendly box.
This unit represents that modular ecosystem concept fully realized. The full GT1000 floor unit is ideal for the player who wants everything in one box. The core is for the player who wants to integrate the sheer power of Arid into their existing hybrid rig.
So it's not trying to replace your whole rig, it's positioning itself as the brain of your rig. It lets you use your favorite analog pedals or loop switchers or outboard gear right alongside the power of Arid.
Precisely. It contains the identical Arid engine. There is zero compromise in sound quality or dynamic response compared to the full GT1000. Its compact size, with full MIDI, USB, and flexible stereo routing, lets it be a dedicated amp modeler, a high-end effects engine, or the command center of a complex pedal board.
The significance here is huge. It proves that the highest level of BAW-SS processing is no longer tied to a giant floorboard.
It confirmed that Arid is a versatile, scalable, modular ecosystem. That power can exist in multiple formats, catering perfectly to the modern guitarist who loves to blend digital and analog components.
Okay, let's take a final look back at this truly remarkable technological path. We've covered 8 major milestones over 22 years, a continuous evolution from early object modeling to dynamic interaction modeling.
It's a perfect study in how rapidly DSP power increased. It's what allowed engineers to move from the necessary compromises of the late 90s to the fluidity we all enjoy today.
We started back in '98 with the GT3. Early KSM establishing that deep control flagship blueprint.
Then moving quickly to the GT6 in 2001, improves KSM, made it a touring standard by introducing that crucial concept of dual signal chains.
Which was immediately followed by the GT8 in 2004. Advanced KSM, delivering unprecedented performance control by allowing 2 independent simultaneous amp models, a huge test for DSP power.
Then we hit the GT10 in 2008, the peak KSM supercomputer, all about maximum routing depth, even if it challenged the user with its complexity.
A necessary pivot came with the GT100 in 2012. Final KSM focused on usability and smoother tones, essentially perfecting that architecture right before the big change.
And then the little GT1 in 2017 democratized that perfected KSM sound, making the tech portable and affordable for pretty much everyone.
Finally, the revolution. The GT1000 in 2018 brings in Air, focusing on true dynamics and that amp-like feel, battling the lingering ghost of digital compression.
And that culminates, so far, in the GT1000 core in 2020, which modularized that Arid power, enabling that seamless integration into hybrid rigs.
So what's the constant thread through all of this? Despite the huge technological upheaval from KSM to Air, what is the core identity of the GT series that sets it apart?
The core identity has always been its singular focus on capability. The GT series has always demanded that the user be willing to dive deep. It's the platform for the player who requires maximum architectural flexibility.
It's not about achieving one great tone.
No, it's about having the power to manipulate that tone, place it anywhere in the chain, route it anywhere you want, and control it through complex MIDI or assignment systems. It is the definition of a comprehensive system builder.
So while KSM was focused on digitally engineering the sound of the components, and Air D is focused on dynamically augmenting the feel of the interaction.
Both generations serve that same high-level professional master.
Yeah.
The need for touring reliability, deep control, and maximum options in a single floor unit.
It's the ultimate example of technology constantly chasing that perfect replication of analog tube interaction, while at the same time offering a level of complexity and versatility that no traditional analog rig could ever hope to achieve.
Absolutely. The GT series has always been about providing all the tools, even if mastering those tools required a bit of effort. A clear focus on capability above convenience.
So I have one last thought for you.
Given the remarkable success of the GT1000 core, in shrinking that flagship Arid engine into such a compact modular format, a really fascinating question arises about the future direction of the platform. BAW-SS spent 2 decades maximizing complexity with something like the GT10, only to pivot toward usability with the GT100. Now that they've achieved this technical parity with the GT1000 and proven modularity with the core, what does the next flagship even look like? Do they return to that instinct of just maximizing capability? Release a huge feature-laden GT2000 packed with even more processing power and physical controls?
Or did they go the other way?
Or do they fully embrace the decentralized modder? Perhaps making the flagship a collection of highly specialized air blocks, a dedicated air-to-air amp modeler, a standalone Arid cabinet loader, a specialized effects switcher, allowing players to build a truly custom, piecemeal digital system that blurs the line entirely between high-end digital modeling and traditional pedal boards.
That is the ultimate question. The GT series started by taking the rack and putting it under your foot, and now it's shrinking the core of that power into a single pedal. The evolution is clearly far from over. Whether you're intrigued by the complex power of the COSM supercomputer era, or you're ready to jump into the dynamics of the AR8 revolution, the history of the BOSS GT series provides a dense, fascinating look at the future of guitar processing.